All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here since I know we're a little short on time. So use up as much as I can. If you're in the right place, you're here to hear me talk about what I call analysis without paralysis, and I'm going to be talking all about investigations and how to perform them. But first, you probably need to understand why you want to listen to me in the first place. So I am a senior incident response consultant with Cisco Talos. Basically means that I deal with incidents day in and day out, and when I'm not dealing with that, helping them prepare so that when they deal with the incident, they're better off. So yeah, I've seen a lot of cases. I do a lot of incident response. Been doing it for almost 10 years now in total. So I took all the things that I've learned from doing all these investigations, and I want to apply that to what you all can do. Because you obviously can't learn how to do 100 investigations without doing 100 investigations. So I'm going to try to dissect that for you, give you at least something to work on. That way your life's a little bit easier. A little bit about me. I actually started in criminal justice and traditional forensic science. Then I learned that that probably is not a very lucrative career. But they told me, what do? I said, I jailbreak iPhones. They said, why aren't you doing that? So I pivoted over that direction. So my focus is all around forensics, incident response, and just breaking everything. And then working, of course, every IT job you can think of, help desk, system administration, infrastructure, then cybersecurity, compliance, all around the gamut, back to where I want to be, which is forensics and incident response. So the whole reason I do this is because this key fact. We're not really ever taught how to do an investigation, but every single day, I'm sure all of you are told, go look at this, go check out the firewall logs, go figure out what's going on. But none of us are actually given a framework to work with. None of us are given examples of how is a good investigation actually conducted. Not dependent on Windows forensics, not a Windows event and log analysis, not memory analysis. How do you just do an investigation if you don't even know what you're looking at? Because half the time you don't. And that's what I'm here to try to clarify. So, why do you need structure? Jumping in leads to a ton of burnout. I'm sure most of you have been as part of some kind of investigation, or you're just looking through, you're troubleshooting. You get to a point where you're just like, okay, we're done. And there's some situations, like ransomware that I'm dealing with for customers, can't really just say that. You can't just say we're done. So you need to have a structure to it. And a lot of our work is very much dependent on that in cybersecurity. We can't really just say, forget about it, because that forget about it could lead to you probably losing your job. So you need something to give you at least a heads up and give you some clarification of what you need to do. The second part of this is then setting very realistic expectations. I know everybody in this room has had their boss, a lead, somebody else come up to them and say, how long is this going to take? When they just told you to start looking at the firewall. You have no idea. What you can do is give them some kind of framework, some kind of idea of, okay, here's the steps I'm going to follow, so then you at least know where I'm going. Because that's what I've learned over time of doing these investigations when customers and people ask me, like, how long is this going to take? What they really want to know is, what are you going to do exactly in a way that I can understand as a non-technical person? So being able to explain your brain is a very, very key skill. And the last thing, like we just talked about, we are often taught how to analyze, but we're not taught how to investigate. I know there was a few talks early on talking about that we lack a lot of contextual and critical thinking in just our day-to-day analysis. We have training on how to use XYZ tool to look at this dashboard and to read the output. But we're not taught how to put that context all together and to actually understand what is happening. How do I understand this framework? We develop all these wonderful frameworks for what attackers do, but we don't have a framework for what we do. And there is incident response, the incident response cycle, of course, but that's still not really where you're sitting. When you're doing the analysis, yeah, I know I need to do containment, but what do I need to analyze to get to that point? That's where I'm trying to fill in. So what I've done is tried to create this methodology because I learned acronyms actually work really well. So ADAPT, very simple. What this is just 5 steps, because I'm trying to treat this at a high level. I'm not trying to give you a framework of how to do Windows forensics efficiently or anything. I'm telling you, you are coming into a situation where you need to do analysis, very vague. So what do you look for? How do you do it? And how do you put that into a way that other people can understand what you are going to do? Because eventually, you're going to need to communicate what you find to them. So it comes down to approach, discovery, association, profiling, and then a timeline. So when we start with approach, what do I mean? It's dead simple. Have a plan. This is something I see time and time again with folks that are coming in, especially to incident response for the first time. They don't set up a plan. They think they just need to start looking. You hear, oh, an alert fired off. Let's just go look at the firewall logs and tell me when you find something. That phrase comes up pretty often. But you don't know what you're looking for. So you want to create a plan. It doesn't have to be anything detailed. Just say, okay, X person is going to go look at the firewall. This person is going to go collect triage. This person is going to make sure everyone has coffee filled. It can be a very simple task, but having a clear role of what you are going to do in investigation is what's going to lead you to being actually successful. In addition to that, it's setting very clear objectives. Understanding whoever probably the moneymaker is for the organization, what is their objective? Like, yeah, I'm sure you want to look at this piece of malware and dissect the hell out of it and figure out every little thing it's going to do. But all they really care about is getting the systems back up and running and the business back up and running. So getting those clear objectives of what is going to be most important to me and what's going to actually get to the point that we finish and we say, okay, we have completed this objective. Now I can go look at my malware and see if there's something else cool there. And then one of the things I've also learned is documentation is an area we all kind of struggle with. So the way around that is using templates. And templates are very basic. They could just be a notes template. It could just be a report template. It could just be an Excel sheet that has pre-filled columns. Stuff like that just helps you go ahead, because as you're doing this analysis, the last thing you want to think about is actually looking at a blank screen in front of you and trying to fill that in as you go. So having those things pre-prepared in advance is very helpful, and that is something that I can provide to you. At the end, I'll show you my GitHub link for that. And then the very last thing here is learning to threat hunt, because threat hunting, as simple as it sounds, is not simple at all. I don't have the time to really get into threat hunting, so my really base I can tell you is understand what you have to understand what is bad. That is the essence of threat hunting. You cannot understand what is bad until you know what you have, because a process spawning up at boot may not be bad. It may be bad, but you don't know until you know what's the normal activity. So if you want to talk more about threat hunting, I'm happy to do that later. Just don't have the time today. But the really key aspect of this is knowing where to look. And a lot of this comes with experience, but I kind of put this into 5 general categories when you come into like incident response. You have your logs, you have triaging, you have forensic analysis, you have threat intelligence, and then you have security tools. Most of us probably deal with security tools and maybe a little bit of logs, but there's a lot of other tools out there that I think we don't really use as much as we should. You'll be surprised how much threat intelligence can help if you just have a single IP address, a single file hash. It's not a perfect trusted source, but it'll put you in the right direction. It'll tell you, hey, this is associated with this ransomware group. Great. Now you have a threat hunt you can start to build right around that ransomware group rather than just looking through the logs hoping to find another IP address. So you want to take the time to really understand where your sources are. And again, this comes back to knowing what you have. What logs do you have? Can you pull a triage collection? Do you have a team that can do the forensic analysis? Do you have a threat intelligence, either a feed or a team that can actually pull that information from you? All of this is very much dependent on how successful you're actually going to be. So then, once you have your approach, you know what you're looking for, you have a plan of how you want to go about this, then you start to get what I call the discovery phase. The discovery phase is basically when you start getting those aha moments, right? You see that IP address, you see that event that's like, that looks a little different, or I don't really know what this computer is. Those are what I call the findings. The important part to this, and what we get often distracted by, is we lose sight of this. We start looking at the IP, then we pivot to the account, then we pivot to the host, and then you forget where you even started from. So making sure you take some time to just document and be very simple about this. I know it sounds rough, but trust me, the more you can do this, the better off you're going to be to actually showcase how much you've done. Also a small point, for anyone that's worked in incident response or forensics or anything, please use UTC. Convert everything to UTC. Your life is going to be so much easier. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten into a console and I'm spending 45 minutes just figuring out if this is a local time zone, is this my default browser time zone, is this UTC? So learn that quickly, because that's going to save you a ton of time as well. So you might be asking, okay, I have my finding. What am I writing down? Am I just writing down the IP address? No, because you have no idea what it's going to mean later. So I have these kind of 5 things to always make sure you write down. 1, the timestamp, preferably UTC. The source, where did this come from? It doesn't have to be in a huge example. Maybe you list the search that you did. Maybe you list the artifact you got it from. Maybe the console that you got it from, the specific dashboard. Just where did you get this from? Second, the event description. You're going to take 1 sentence and just write out in 1 objective sentence, what is this? I don't know what. Good timing. So just write out, what exactly are you looking at, right? Is this a logon that occurred on this host from this IP address at this time? Objective statement of what it is. Then you want to add context. Now the context is where your subjective view comes in. And I know this is something that kind of feels off because I feel like we're always told, especially in forensics, and unless you're doing like real legal digital forensics, your context is very important. Your subjectivity, your actual analysis is really important because otherwise, yeah, you probably can be replaced by IT. But context is not something any AI platform is ever going to replace. You need to be able to say, okay, this user logged in at this time. Nobody's working at this time. That's why this is unusual. Otherwise, this wouldn't be seen as unusual. So give that context. And your context is going to evolve with your experience over time. So I'm always of the opinion, even if you don't know what a process is, write it down. Say, I don't know what this process is, and I'm going to look into it. That's your context. But having all that information documented as you go means you're going to learn as you go and go through these investigations and get better and better. And the last bit I call is the code. The code is basically just a snapshot of what you're looking at. Maybe you copy over the actual logs. Maybe you copy over the actual file path. The idea is someone looking through your notes doesn't have to go back and redo all your work to find what exactly you're looking at. They can see it right in your notes, so they can follow along and move through, and you'll see how that all applies later on. Then you have the association. So you got all your findings. You probably have 17 different little things that you found, and now you're going to start putting it together. This part should be relatively simple if you follow those directions, because really you're just going to put in time order and see what matches up. Maybe you see a logon, then you see 20 minutes later is an execution. Maybe you see another logon, and then you don't see anything for a few hours. So now you know, okay, maybe I need to look in that few hour block to see if something else happened. And you're going to start to put that puzzle together little by little. This is also a really good time to start grabbing your indicators. So if you haven't already, extract out, pull out those IP addresses you found, pull out those usernames you found, pull out the executable names, and just collect that list. This is also what I call standardization. So again, if you haven't put it into UTC, please do. I'm a huge fan of using the ISO 8601 format. That way everything is in the same time, everything is very clear. There's no question about what time zone is this, where did this timestamp come from. It's all in the same, just takes a few minutes just to make sure that's there. The other thing that's very frustrating is consistent terminology. And this one has been a struggle because many tools and vendors have different names for the same exact thing, and it's horrible. For example, you'll see connected IP address and source network address. Just make it easy. Source IP address. Use your simple language. Try to make sure that it's all contextual because, again, the people that are looking at this are relying on your expertise. So yes, you are translating those fields for them, is the idea. And then one thing I always like to think is as you're reading through your notes, just think about it as in terms of writing it for someone who doesn't know what your job is. If you can do that, you can often be very effective at communicating it through writing. Then we get into profiling. So profiling is not as detailed as it sounds here. I understand that nobody has the time to be a true threat intelligence analyst in the middle of an incident unless that is your full-time role. But the idea is just to understand what you've seen so far, look at those list of findings, and start Googling. Start to see, do I see this same pattern occurring somewhere else? Do I see this IP address appearing somewhere else? Have I seen this executable somewhere else? And that's going to help you understand more and more what's out there because people have taken a lot of great time writing really great reports. So you can use that as contextual information. So if you see a ransomware executable and you see, oh, they used SMB to transmit this, now you can go back to your investigation and say, okay, let's look at SMB. Did they do the same thing? I'll tell you 8 times out of 10, they probably did because a lot of these tactics tend to repeat themselves, especially when you're dealing with something like ransomware. And then this is just a little way to identify what an indicator is. You have network, file, identity-based, so like host names, and then behavioral. So sometimes your actual indicator might be a series of events. Your indicator might be logon, execution, and then PowerShell spun up. That might be your indicator itself. So being able to collect that type of contextual information is going to be real helpful, but again, it's all reliant on you taking the time to document as you go through. And then we get to the last part, which is the timeline. So the timeline is evolved in terms, there's tools out there that can generate timelines for you, and those are wonderful and great. But what I'm talking about here is a little bit different. This is essentially a timeline of everything you found. And if you look at those kind of headers I'm talking about here, all of this should already be written down. You're just organizing it. You're taking that timestamp, you're taking where it came from, you're taking the user associated, you're taking the evidence source, and you're taking that description, and just put it in an Excel sheet. What you're essentially going to be creating is a database. Just a database of here's all the events that we can see. The other thing that's very helpful with this is going to be a much, much easier way to showcase what has happened to other folks. Because once you have this database of information, then you can start to make the pretty charts. Then you can start to make the nice timeline that the lawyers are asking for, because if they read through your report, they're probably not going to understand it. But this is something, throw in there, it's very easy to understand. You can clearly see where the gaps are. You can clearly see which tools are giving you the most important information, and it's just going to be more collectively better for you as you keep going through this process over and over again. So, to summarize, because I don't have a lot of time, so if you want to talk about it more in depth, I'm happy to. I have a lot more about this, but I just wanted to get this out there. You can see, we're taking the approach, get your plan together, your discovery. As you have your plan coming together and you're finding things, start writing things down. Put them in the right time order, see which ones relate to each other, see if there's any other activity that relates to what you've seen so far to see if there's any areas you missed, and then put together that nice little timeline at the end. So why do I tell you to do this? Because me telling you just to write your notes is not a very effective argument. So you do get something out of it. Firstly, you have a report that's about 80% written at this point. Because if you write your notes in that way, your report is done. As someone that early in my career that has done this, when you go through these incidents, sometimes they can take days and days and days. I cannot tell you what happened on that first day if I just didn't take the time to write it down. So if you do this, and hopefully collaboratively with other people, now you have this report developing over and over, so at the end, you're just cleaning it up. You're not recreating what happened. You're not going back into your notes and trying to figure out what all happened. This is just you cleaning everything up, having a nice solid report. Timeline, like I mentioned, very easy to digest, much easier to go through. This is something you can put into more of like metrics if people are interested of, oh, what tools are effective for us? Look at the timeline. Well, we got 7 findings from these 2 artifacts, so we should put more money into those. You can start to lead those arguments better rather than just telling, well, we like, CrowdStrike or whatever else. Now you have proof that it did work for us. It is better. And then the last thing that really main reason I did all this is to show how you contributed. Because as an analyst, it's hard to really showcase how well you do at the end of an incident. Because you're probably tired, you don't have the time to really go through and everything. So what you're really trying to do here is just show, here's my report, here's everything that's written out. If you want to question my work, read the report. It's all there. They're not going to rely on you telling them how well you did. They're not going to rely on somebody else giving that input. You put the work in, it's there. And then ideally, the more people that can contribute to that, the better you're going to be over time. So I know it was quick. I know I didn't get into a lot of it, but I have a ton of resources here. I recommend you look into all of them. Ideally, the Chris Sanders courses, one around investigation theory, was a huge reason for this and how I kind of put all this together. As well as Brett Shavers has a ton of information regarding this. So please check out all of those resources. As I mentioned, I do have a GitHub. So when I talked about making those templates, I have pre-created them. They're just available. They're just Word and Excel documents. Go download them. If you just need that starting point for report template, there it is. Go use it. Use it how you need to be. Change it up. I really don't care. I just wanted a starting point so you're not starting from zero. I also write a blog about all this type of stuff on my site there. You can find me usually at Cybercoat or Chocolate Coat everywhere else. But yeah, other than that, I think that's all I got. Appreciate the time.